My favorite weatherman, Eric Berger, has announced that spring is over and summer is here. It will be months and months before we feel cool spring breezes again. A new season has started, and a new season always promises something, right? We're going to leave things behind. We can leave back in the colder months all of our guilt and shame and embarrassment and resentment. We can do that in this summer season, right? We start off the summer with a clean sheet, a blank slate of open paper, right? No, not going to happen. Things break or break down. They continue to break. Promises, friendship, sobriety, hope, communication. This breaking happens because our human hearts and our very institutions are frail and imperfect. Messy. Brokenness happens, and it happens again to you, to me. Shame is a natural thing. It's a necessary thing. It is a condition of being human, albeit uncomfortable. It can spiral out of control. Do not exceed the therapeutic dose. You are good even when you feel bad. And that's true of all of the dark emotions: guilt, resentment, anger, and embarrassment. And this morning I would especially mention grief. We need each of these. They are a part of being human. We can't wish them away. We can't cast them away, but we can rein them in and ameliorate them. In this morning's talk, I will talk about shame, but I will, looking out to this broken tree, nod to grief as well. The spirituality of this community, the spirituality of this Unitarian Fellowship of Houston community, can redeem you from excessive shame. We, UUs, believe that we are inherently good, but we often have the experience of ourselves being bad. There's the psychic reality that we feel bad. I feel bad about my actions. We have strong impulses to violate our highest values. We experience ourselves as broken. Sometimes it's from things that we've been taught, but sometimes it seems like we learn that lesson way too easily. The rejection of original sin, our UU tradition rejects the doctrine of original sin, and we're chary of the whole idea of sin, especially original sin, because we weren't born evil. And our tradition is that we are inherently good. So why do we have these harmful impulses? Why do we have these destructive impulses? Why are we ashamed and feel guilty? Shaming involves degrading and humiliating and insulting and embarrassing and even in dehumanizing others. We feel shame for our own actions, and we sometimes shame others. And I'll say as a side, plagiarism is very much a part of this last season's national conversation. And I swiped a lot of this sermon material from the great cloud of witness, which is the internet, without attribution or citation, because the order of service didn't have room for footnotes or bibliography. So I feel ashamed to admit that, but not very much. Our negative feelings are natural, and they are useful. Rob Henderson writes, "Why do you feel shame when others falsely accuse you of misconduct? Why do you feel shame when someone falsely accuses you of misconduct? Your heart rate elevates, your cheeks flush, your body temperature feels like it's rising even though you didn't do anything wrong. The reason is that social devaluation by others is sufficient to elicit the emotion of shame, even when there is no wrongdoing. The true trigger of shame is negative perception of the self by others, not the self." personal story. Decades ago, I was a college freshman at Georgia Tech. I went through rush week and I visited a bunch of fraternities, and one of them, the Delta Upsilon, liked me and told me that they were going to give me a bid. They were going to ask me to join their fraternity. So I went to a party, and the party at their frat house, and then they asked me and a couple of other young men to join their frat, and they took us out to a steak and eggs kitchen, which was open 24 hours. And we left the frat house around 11:30 and got there about midnight, and there were, maybe 15 or 20 of us in the party, and the waitresses scurried to find us a table together, and they put tables together, and the breakfast was on them. I didn't have to pay. And I ate a steak and egg breakfast, and they told me they extolled the virtues of their fraternity and its academic tradition and its fellowship tradition. And I was pretty sold on this group. And then we finished up the breakfast, and we walked out into the parking lot. And our waitress, who was a very thin and frail and older woman, came running out into the parking lot and said in broken English, "Gentlemen, was the service good? Because not one of you," and she used a string of language that I will not repeat from this pulpit, but she did not like us, and she said, "Not one of you left me a tip." And I was working at the time, I was making my living as a busboy, and I was ashamed that I had been part of a group that stiffed this waitress on such a large party, who had done such a good job for us. And I was ashamed to be part of that group, and I made up my mind not to join that frat, and I didn't join that frat. The president of the frat stumbled over and pulled a handful of dollars out of his wallet and threw it at her, but it was gone. For my self-respect, I couldn't join that group. And the shame did me some good. The shame warned me away from a connection that would not have been right for me. I turned out okay otherwise, I'm told. We can overdo shame. We can become trapped in cycles of shame. We can become ashamed of being ashamed. We feel some shame, and then we note that we're feeling guilty, and we feel ashamed of that, and then we note that we're feeling ashamed, and we feel embarrassed for that, and we note that we're feeling embarrassed, and we feel guilty for that, and it just goes around and around, and you can get trapped in a trap there. Don't do that. I will tell you that these emotions are necessary. You will not wish them away entirely, but you don't have to you don't have to run in a hamster wheel. Let yourself feel your shame. Let yourself feel your guilt. Let yourself feel your regret, but only in therapeutic doses. Like any drug, don't overdo it. Don't overdose on it. And your friends may tell you that you must not feel ashamed. Your friends may tell you that you must not feel grief. Your friends may tell you you must not feel guilt. Listen to their counsel, but consider that you can right-size it better than try and pretend that you don't feel these things, because you will not entirely wish them away. I knew years ago a man who had grown up as a young man, had been part of a cult, and he left the cult and was active with the Cult Awareness Network and was trying to talk other people about joining cults. And he said that one of the cleverest tricks that the cults played to make people feel powerless was to give them what sounded like a very simple task to do, which actually turned out to be impossible. So one of the things that they had told him to do was, every time you walk through a door, think of God. And he could not get through a day walking through doors and every time remember God. It sounds simple, but it's one of those things that sounds like a simple task, but you are destined to fail. And that sense of, I'm not competent to do even a simple task, like that is something that will warp your sense of yourself and make you give your power up to another person. And so, if someone gives you the assignment of not feeling shame, if someone gives you the assignment of not feeling guilt, if somebody gives you the assignment of not feeling embarrassment, thank them for their concern, but keep your own counsel. They'll tell you not to care what others think of you, but you do care. To some extent, you must care. And then we accept ourselves, even in the face of the guilt we carry and the shame we carry and the embarrassment we carry, there's place for you and I to accept our wholeness. We accept ourselves as whole even when we are broken and incomplete and given to harmful behavior. You will continue to be ashamed. You will continue to grieve. This summer will not wipe your slate clean, but there can be a redemption. I worked for Kaiser Aluminum, my first job out of college, when I left Georgia Tech. I worked for Kaiser Aluminum in Chalmette, Louisiana, in a refinery there. And I was not cut out for that job. We had a rotating shift, a week in the morning and a week in the evening and a week on the graveyard. And I could not keep up with that. I would, especially on the graveyard shift, I would fall asleep in the line office. I would fall asleep out on the line. I was crawling up these huge aluminum pots with a ruler in one hand and a flashlight in the other hand, and the third hand used to hold on to the ladder 20 feet above molten aluminum, and to make measurements, and I couldn't make the same measurement twice in a row, and I was just not cut off for it. And eventually, Mr. Gilfan, my boss, called me into the office and said, "David, you're trying really hard, and you're pretty bright. None of the other young engineers are trying as hard as you are, but David, you're just not cut out for this job. I'm not firing you, but I think you should start looking for another job." And I was ashamed. It was my first real job out of high school. I'd been busboying and waiting tables, and this was the first real adult job that I'd had, and I wasn't good enough, and I was ashamed. And I went, but the one good thing about a rotating shift is it gives you a lot of time during business hours to go look for another job. And I went down into an engineering consulting firm in downtown New Orleans, close to the French Quarter, Wakedel and Associates. And I walked in there, and they gave me an application, and told me a bit about their firm, told me to take the application home and fill it out, and I took it home and lost it. I looked all over the apartment. I could not anywhere find the application. And I said, well, I can't go. I mean, how professional is that going to look to walk back in and say, I want you to hire me, but I lost your application. But I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I was a failure as a process engineer in an aluminum, and I was ashamed that I had lost my best shot at the best job I had seen of all the want ads I had read. But I eventually swallowed my pride and went down there and asked for another copy of the application. And they said, hey, while you're here, the guy that would be your boss is ready. He's got some time this afternoon. You can fill out the form later. Let us let you tour and meet your boss and your boss's boss and some of the other people. And it all went well. And even when I left, they told me I would be getting an offer even though I hadn't filled out the form. And I walked out of the building, out of the engineering building, around the corner into Lafayette Park in New Orleans, and a brass band was playing John Philip Sousa. Dun, dun, da, 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 da. And I was like, there is a redemption sometimes from your shame. There is a redemption. There is no elimination of difficult feelings. Rather, it is to be present. Your assignment from me is to be present with whatever life brings. As Margaret Fuller wrote, here, as elsewhere, the gain of creation consists always in the growth of individual minds which live and aspire as flowers bloom and birds sing in the midst of morasses and in the continual development of that thought, the thought of human destiny, which gives to eternity adequately to express and which ages of failure only seemingly impede. Shame is natural, necessary, a condition of being human, albeit uncomfortable. But in this summer season ushered in with destruction and grief and loss, do not allow it to spiral out of control. Do not exceed the therapeutic dose. You are good. Even right now, when you feel bad, you are good. And the spirit of this community, of this Unitarian Fellowship of Houston community, the people sitting on your left and right and fore and aft of you, the spirituality of this community can rescue you from excessive shame and cycles of spirals of guilt and embarrassment and shame. In this coming summer, people will think badly of you, and you will feel shame. Extract a morsel of wisdom from it, a therapeutic dose, and spit out the rest. While communities can shame you, communities can affirm you and relieve you of your excess shame. You are sitting this morning in such a community, the Unitarian Fellowship of Houston. We are whole at our core because of the great, unnameable, sometimes inconceivable love in which we live. And that love lives here in this room, sitting in these pews. Turn to that love. Thank you.